of Anglo music in this country, the guy who knows the most, okay, with my respects to Manolo, I love you, Manolo Edon, but Alejandro is the standard bearer now for radio in English, Anglo music, radio director at Advanced Media Todelar, programming manager for Likey's. How cool is this? Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's so great to be here. I'm so glad to be here.
It is cool to have you here, Alejandro. There's so much that we want to talk with you about. First of all, I think what everyone who hears you says, where does this guy get that amazing English? Where'd you get that amazing English?
That's pretty funny because
I know the answer.
It all started here, It all started at the Centro Colombo Americano back in Manizales when I was about 11 years old. I started my courses over there. I was very interested in speaking another language I moved away and I left for South Florida, and I lived there for about 5 years, and I perfected my English in high school,
And then you came back, and when you were in high school in the U.S., did you think you were going to be a radio guy?
I always thought I was going to be a radio guy.
So from the time you were little too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wait, 11, how did it start? Like
it started at 11.
I don't know. I think it was just listening to my mom hear the radio at a very young age. Many important events that happened in Colombia took place, and I was informed of them through the radio. Good things, bad things. Lucho Herrera, the World Cup in 1990.
And the taking of the Palacio de Justicia, everything. This is still such a radio culture.
It is.
Particularly for news radio, talk radio, football, music.
Yeah.
We are seeing, kids today, my kids do not listen to radio. My kids are Deezer, Spotify, YouTube.
That's right.
What do you see happening to music radio? When I was a kid, you got your musical, they say your musical tastes are pretty much formed in high school. So most of my musical tastes are in high school. I have some newer things on my MP3 player on my phone. But your musical tastes kind of stop and it becomes, the music today is reggaeton, it all sounds the same. But because when I was a kid, I was a kid 70s, 80s, finished high school in 84, so that's where my musical brain is. My kids are, and I'm hearing Prince, baby. Speaking of my age, 1984, Purple Rain was 1984. But I'm seeing kids today getting music off Spotify. I'm seeing,
technology is changing everything.
My husband's a musician, and he creates albums, and the album has a theme, and now it's you buy a song.
Yes.
What's your take on that, Alejandro? How do you see radio? Where do you see radio going?
I'm afraid. I don't know. I think in Colombia, in South America, radio is going to be here for a while.
We're still good.
Yeah,
right?
we're going to be 10 years. We're still going to have a job for about 10 years. But I think audio is changing, and the way people are getting their musical experiences, recorded musical experiences, is still very much the same, but it kind of changes because of the medium, because the internet has changed everything about us. And it's changing everything about music. So audio is going to be there for a while. Spotify, Deezer, Apple Music, all these streaming services are going to perfect their algorithms so that we can get closer to the music that we love more and more, and we can, choose it and share it with friends. But I also think that there is still going to be a curator, DJ, being an important part of Spotify and Apple Music and Deezer in the future. So I don't think radio will survive the internet in the sense that once we get connected cars on the roads here in Latin America.
But I'm concerned, and please disabuse me of my concern. I'm concerned that younger people are not getting the variety that maybe we were able to get by listening to the radio, by switching around the dial, because nowhere to lie, my kids are freaking reggaeton all the time.
Oh, really? It would appear different. I would think that having all this social media and YouTube and all these possibilities, you can actually, no offense, but I know that people listening to certain radio stations, they will have to listen to what's there and only what's there.
Yeah,
Right.
but when kids are, I find with my kids, and their friends, they search for what they're already listening to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
As
looking at,
opposed to listening to a pop station where you go from a Justin Timberlake to a different mix, unless you're listening to a specific genre station. Like what you do at La X is it's Anglo music, but you don't stick to one specific genre.
we try not to, but it's harder
Getting
and
harder.
consolidation on all areas of life. I mean, we're getting global consolidation in terms of economics. We're looking at political consolidation. We're also looking at an aesthetic consolidation. Music, recorded music is consolidated by the businesses that run recorded music, and these businesses have been around for over 60 years, and I don't think that's going to change. And in spite of the fact that we have so many options, and there was sort of, that kind of changed in a very anarchic way when Napster came around, and we all thought that this was actually going to change. And we saw major shifts in popular music happening from 2003 to somewhere around 2010, when the entire wave of downloads was basically just regulated by the streaming space. It took the major labels about 10 years to actually, fix themselves around that space that, put them in a crisis. And once they already regulated that, we go back to square one. We're listening to the same pop music all over the place, and we're, listening to it on Spotify. So it doesn't really matter how much music is out there. Music still has that power to control the masses in a way that if you listen to something, 10 of your friends will.
Okay.
And that's pretty much how it
But that brings an
goes.
interesting question, and it's who creates the taste? For example, you see people like Shakira, Carlos Vives starting to do reggaeton.
Yeah.
You see songs like Despacito, which has a reggaeton backbeat, becoming the biggest song in the United States and in Europe.
And you're-
So, is it because it's what everybody wants to listen to, or is it because of what's happening in terms of what's being played? Who creates that? Is it?
It's a little bit of both,
Yeah.
It's hard to say where it all starts because popular music is so dependent on people's taste, as you say. But at the same time, it's been known that for over 60 or 70 years, music has been controlled by major labels and people who actually know their way around music, and not only music and arts and repertoire, but also around the business of recording it, selling it, distributing it, doing all these things that
Packaging, yes.
Right, all that stuff has been key in the way that we consume music. With the explosion of rock and roll, we saw this happening. It was an unstoppable force. Rock and roll was unstoppable, and there were people there who could make it bigger, and they made it bigger.
It's played, otherwise stuff wouldn't get played.
Right, I know. Like back in the 50s, it was a major scandal, and it was like Alan Freed was like the poster child of payola.
Yeah.
But there were so many other people
But
below
was he
him.
really receiving payola?
Yeah, he actually was.
There's debate about that, if he actually was receiving or he was accused.
He did. But I think that one of the reasons why he did it was because America was so segregated, and it was so hard to play colored music on the radio. And he was a white man, and he wanted to play these records, but he knew his job was on the line, and he knew that at some point he could actually get fired for playing colored music.
Unless some money was coming into the station.
Right.
Wow.
So, a guy like Leonard Chess, who was already looking into musicians and recording them, like Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry, needed the help of white American radio to get that message across. And he couldn't do it because it was forbidden. So he actually broke the law to get black music into white people's hands.
And that's why I'm saying I wasn't being negative about it, because otherwise we wouldn't have heard it and music wouldn't have progressed.
Right. Yeah.
So
You always get there's nothing really black and white about anything when it comes to
Right.
music.
Right.
Like there's always this gray spot. So
Mhm.
yes, you have some trends that you might not like, but at the same time, those trends are liked by the masses, and some good things come of it, and some bad things come of it too.
That's right. That part of history really shows that radio has this huge power to
Yeah.
shape culture.
Yeah.
Do you think like nowadays radio still has this like big role in shaping culture? How do you?
I
what's your
think
take on that?
it does. I think it does. I think penetration in Colombia, according to the Dana statistics in 2015, which was the last cultural consumption survey that they took, was about 92%.
Colombia is a huge radio.
It is.
Huge.
It is.
And the U.S. too, maybe not with younger generations, and radio in the U.S., particularly talk radio, really affects people's political views. And I think a lot of what we're seeing going on in the U.S. right today has to do with big talk radio, either ultra-conservative or liberal, who are shaping people's views. I'm gonna get a little more fluffy here. When Alejandro Marín goes home and wants to chill, what does he listen to?
I do listen to a lot of jazz nowadays, you know. I kind of try to get away from pop as far as I can because I listen to it all day, so it gets on my nerves, and it's sometimes like all these things that I know that are happening in the music business aren't really very encouraging for my job.
Yeah.
So I try to get into old stuff and innocent stuff and naive stuff, things that humankind was just kind of discovering. So I do a lot of crate digging. I do a lot of vinyl shopping, and yes, I'm looking into New Orleans jazz nowadays, and looking into that and buying some records, and also looking for gospel records, which I also love. And that's pretty much it. And yes, I do have my pop pleasures to play.
Okay, well there comes another. We talk about this on the show a lot about guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
What is Alejandro Marin's musical guilty pleasure?
Well, I have to say that reggaeton is my guiltiest of guilty pleasures. I mean, it's a great genre. I mean, it's so revolutionary, so disruptive, so rock and roll. It's got such a big attitude, and
It's attitude.
Yeah.
It's a big attitude.
you know, it's the same way it was back in the 70s with punk music, and the same it was back in the 60s with rock and roll. I mean, older people don't get it, your kids love it, and it's kind of like the same thing that happened to you when you started listening to those Metallica records in the 80s. Your parents were going to kill you because you were listening to this satanic kind of music, and nowadays it's like, oh my goodness, why are you listening to that misogynistic crap? And and at the same time you sit there and you listen to it and you say, okay, well, I
You start
know.
bouncing a little bit.
Of course.
That takes me to your question, where you were saying what determines what people like to listen to, and actually maybe it's just like a cultural need.
Yeah,
So,
it's a
like
need
people
to,
are craving for something, or
Sure.
right, and then the phenomenon takes
Well,
place.
in terms of cultural need, as all of our listeners know, my kid was in France the last semester. My kid, who before he went to France was like, he's Colombian and U.S., but he was like so much more U.S. Went to France and like rediscovered his Colombianness.
okay.
So my kid
which happens to a
now,
lot of people.
my
that
happens to a
travel.
lot of
has
people. It
come
happened to
home,
me. It happened
but
to
and
me.
this thrills me. My kid has come home and like I'll hear like Joey Arroyo coming out of his room.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah! Like, I hear like Fania All Stars, like, dude, go back to France because this is great. But he also brought French reggaeton back.
Oh wow.
Okay. So it's interesting to watch his progression too. And he'll still listen to Zeppelin with me, but and he picks up my phone and goes, Mom, you have a ton of Joey Arroyo and Humberto Santa Rosa. I'm like, yeah. I could talk music with you all day, and I can't even tell you how cool it was to have you here
Great.
And to our little pinitos in radio here. Because
Hey,
radio
you
is
guys
so much
got a
fun.
great station here, man. I mean,
It's pretty cool.
It's
Getting there, we're
awesome.
getting there.
Coming from you? Wow, this is great.
no, I mean, it's like one of the best online stations I've seen. You know, it's well set up. I mean, the cameras, the live, I mean, everything's looking so cool.
Thanks
Come on.
thanks to the American
Thanks. Well,
embassy.
this was an idea that I had this like crazy brain idea because I've always loved radio as well. And I was talking to.
And you got a great voice.
Thank you very
Did
She
you
much.
has
do
a
radio?
She has a good
I've
radio voice.
done a lot of voiceovers.
She-
Okay. I
do a lot of
she has a
voiceovers.
really good
But you
radio
never
voice.
worked like on public radio or stuff like
I
that?
would love to work on public radio. I'm like the
You would-
NPR
You
guy.
would be a great podcaster.
Oh,
You,
wow.
you heard that from Alejandro Marín. So we were like this. There's no radio in Colombia in English, and I was talking to Sheila Weir from the U.S. Embassy, who sadly is leaving us very soon. And she said, "What a great idea! Why don't you put something together, and we'll see if we can do a grant."
Awesome.
So we did, and I called Jackie and said, "Jackie, let's do radio." And so Jackie was all over that, and here we are, almost
Wow.
2
They
years
have the
later,
equipment, and now here we are.
And here we
A
are.
year and a half later,
Yeah.
we're still once a week.
having fun. So
That's really cool that what you're doing is like preserving the spirit of radio, and that's awesome. You
it's
know?
what we want to do. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us. This is
Thank
very
you.
cool, very exciting, and we hope you'll come back.
I will. You
Um,
know.